You've had the thought, maybe so many times it has become a kind of background noise, something that runs quietly beneath every hard moment, every lonely stretch, every time something in your life gets heavy enough that another person might actually be able to help. The thought is, I don't want to bother them. But that isn't quite it, is it? Because bothering implies inconvenience, something small and correctable. What you actually feel is bigger than that. It's closer to, if I bring this to them, I will cost them something. My pain has a weight to it, and they are already carrying enough. And the most generous thing I can do, maybe the only generous thing I can do, is not add mine to the pile. So you don't send the text. You type it and delete it. You start to say something real in the middle of a conversation, and then you redirect, pivot, ask how they're doing instead. You're sitting with something that is eating you from the inside, and someone who genuinely cares about you is sitting right there, and you say, I'm fine, with a sincerity that is almost real, because some part of you has been saying it for so long that you have almost convinced yourself. You have become very good at carrying things alone. What most people from the outside would call strength, you know as something more exhausting than that. You know it as the particular weight of deciding over and over again, across years of ordinary days, that your needs are the ones that don't make the list. Not because no one offered, not because you have no one, but because something in you, something older than the logic you'd use to explain it, keeps pulling back before you get to the point where you'd have to find out whether you were right. And the not finding out, the staying safely behind the line, is its own kind of loneliness. One that never announces itself as loneliness, one that just sits there, quiet and total, in the space between what happened and what you told anyone about it. The common story about people who feel like burdens is that it comes from low self-worth, that somewhere along the way they stopped believing they deserved care, that the fix is self-esteem work, learning to value yourself, recognizing that your needs are as legitimate as anyone else's, receiving love without deflecting it. And that framing isn't wrong, exactly, but it misses something important about the way this actually works in a body. Because most people who carry this feeling don't feel worthless in general. They feel specifically, acutely costly to the people they love. And there is a difference. The feeling isn't, I am nothing. The feeling is, I am too much. And too much, I have seen, has consequences. This was never a flaw waiting to be corrected. It was an accurate reading of a real situation, made a long time ago, by someone much younger and more vulnerable than you are now. There is nothing wrong with you. There is something that happened to you. Somewhere in the history of who you became, love arrived with conditions that looked something like this. The people you needed had limits, and those limits were visible, and approaching them had a cost. Maybe the cost was withdrawal. The parent who went quiet and unreachable when you asked for too much. Maybe it was something sharper. The way the temperature of a room changed when your needs became inconvenient. Maybe it was more subtle than either. The exhausted face, the barely audible sigh, the sense that you had used up your allowance without being told what the allowance was. Children learn to read that. They always do. And what you read was, the amount of me that is acceptable has a ceiling. I should stay below it. So you did. And then you kept doing it. And at some point the calculation became automatic and the ceiling became invisible. And what had once been a careful strategy became something closer to reflex. And the reflex became something so woven into how you move through the world that you stopped noticing it was a choice at all. The first thing worth holding here, and hold it carefully because it resists being held, is this. The instinct to protect the people you love from the weight of your pain is not pathology. It is care, distorted, self-erasing, ultimately isolating care, but care. The reason you minimize what you're carrying is because some part of you is still trying to protect someone. The reason you swallow the hard thing instead of saying it is because your love for the people in your life is real, and it has, somewhere along the way, gotten tangled up with the belief that the most loving thing you can do is take up less space. That is not damage. That is love that learned the wrong shape. What this feels like from the inside is a kind of constant low-level arithmetic. Before you open your mouth about anything difficult, there is a calculation already running. How heavy is this? How much am I asking them to hold? Have I been too much this week, this month, in this friendship? Is this the kind of thing that will make them feel responsible for me? And will that responsibility feel like a weight to them? And will they start to pull back? And will I lose them? And is whatever I need to say actually worth that risk? All of this happens in less than a second. More like a reflex than a decision, most of the time. And the answer is almost always the same. No, not worth it. Swallow it. Find another way. And so you become someone who is consistently, impressively fine. You become the person others describe as low maintenance. Easy to be around. Never dramatic. Always the steady one in the room. People mean this as a compliment and you receive it as one. And somewhere underneath the quiet, something is starving. Because being low maintenance has a cost that never gets named. The cost is the slow accumulation of things you never said. The conversations that never happened. The moments when someone asked how you were doing and you said, tired but okay. And they took you at your word because you have never given them reason not to. The version of you that exists in other people's minds is someone who is fine. And they believe that version because you have worked carefully and consistently to make it convincing. What makes this lonelier than ordinary loneliness is that the isolation is one you built yourself. You are not alone because no one wants to be close to you. You are alone because every time someone comes close enough to really know you, you move the important parts slightly out of reach. You let them in to a point, and then you manage, from there, what they actually see. There is a particular kind of exhaustion in this that is different from regular tiredness. It is the exhaustion of being the person who holds things together for everyone while quietly coming apart inside. Of asking how other people are doing with genuine warmth and care, while treating your own inner life like something that shouldn't take up too much room in the conversation. Of carrying not just your own weight, but the additional weight of making sure no one can see how much you're carrying. You become skilled at redirecting. When a conversation drifts towards something real about you, you pivot toward the other person. Ask them a question, shift the focus, become interested in their life in a way that is genuine, but also functions as armor. People experience this as generosity. And it is. It is also the oldest trick you know for keeping yourself safe. And somewhere in the body, running parallel to all of it, is a need that doesn't stop just because it isn't being met. The need to be known. Not the managed version of you, not the fine version, not the person who always asks how others are doing, but the full weight of you, including the parts that are hard and uncertain and raw and afraid and asking. That need doesn't stop. It quiets down when you get busy. It waits. And in the small hours or in the strange sadness that sometimes arrives for no apparent reason in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, it comes back. What I am describing is not weakness. It is not neediness. It is not something to be ashamed of or fixed or managed into silence. It is what happens when a person who is built to survive in a particular kind of emotional environment, one where need was dangerous, carries that survival mechanism forward into a life where the original danger is no longer there. The body adapted. The adaptation was intelligent, and it cost you something. And both of those things are true at once. Here is what makes this harder. The strategy works. That is the grief of it. People do find you easy to be around. Relationships and friendships do stay intact because you never push past the place where things get messy and uncertain. The ceiling you've been managing holds. which means the withdrawal you have always been afraid of doesn't come, which means the strategy gets confirmed every time, because nothing terrible happened, which means you do it again. But here is the cost of it that goes unseen, being cared for without being known. The particular hollowness of having people who love you genuinely, who would show up for you, who have said explicitly that they would be there, and still not being able to let them. Because knowing they would show up and being able to ask are two different things. And the space between them is where a lot of people quietly live their whole lives. The people who love you for the version they've been allowed to see. And they love that version genuinely. This is important. This is real. This is not nothing. But what they know of you is partial. And the partiality is yours. And some part of you is aware of this in every room, in every conversation. Aware that the closeness is real but also managed, that the warmth between you and the people you love is genuine but also bounded, that what they know of you ends somewhere before the heaviest parts. What rarely gets said is this: there is something quietly asymmetrical about these relationships, even when no one can name it. You know the people you love with real depth. You remember what they told you last month, last year. You hold their stories carefully and return to them. But they don't quite have the same access to you. Not because they don't want it, but because you have organised things, gently and consistently, to prevent it. And over time, something in the connection reflects this. Not a coldness, not a distance, just a slight sense on both sides of being close but not entirely equal in the knowing. The people you love are not failing you by not pushing harder. You are not failing them by protecting them. This is not a story of fault. It is a story of an old instruction, stay below the ceiling, that is still running in a room where the ceiling was always higher than you were told. There is something worth holding in this, even in the grief of it, the care behind the silence, the choosing over and over to absorb rather than transfer, the tender, exhausting work of loving people in a way that asks nothing back. That restraint came from somewhere real. It was, for a long time, the only version of love you knew how to trust. And the fact that it is costing you now does not erase what it was then. What begins to shift is rarely dramatic. It is usually something small enough to almost miss. It might be a moment when you almost say the true thing, the real weight of it, the actual version, and then don't. And the distance between the almost and the silence feels, for the first time, less like safety and more like loss. The sensation of choosing the ceiling when you could have let yourself be known, and feeling that choice land differently than it used to. It might be someone saying, "You can tell me things, you know," and instead of redirecting with warmth the way you always do, some part of you stays in the sentence for a second longer. Lets it mean something before the reflex closes back over it. It might be noticing one afternoon that the people who are still here, the ones who have stayed, who have asked again, who have moved toward you even when you gave them less than they wanted, are not staying because you have been easy. They are staying in spite of not being allowed all the way in, which means the weight you have been so careful to hide from them has not driven them away, which means the ceiling you have been managing is almost certainly lower than what they could actually hold. That is a third noble reframe, not a consolation but an honest observation. Every person who is still in your life, every friendship that has survived your careful management of what you let them see, is evidence against the belief that your full weight would be too much. They haven't left, not because you hid everything from them, but because even the parts that came through, the tiredness behind the fine, the deflections they half noticed, the moments where you got close and pulled back, even those parts did not drive them away. The shift is not a cure. It is not the moment everything changes and the old arithmetic stops running. It is something quieter than that. The first time the question underneath the arithmetic becomes audible. The question that has always been, whether you knew it or not. If I let myself be known fully, will they still be here? And the very first beginning of an answer is not certainty. It is just the slow, careful recognition that you have been organising your entire inner life around avoiding the test, and that the evidence already available, if you let yourself look at it, suggests you might not fail it the way you expect. If this found you somewhere true tonight, if something in here described a room you've been living in without quite having words for it, tell me in the comments, what does the voice that talks you out of sending the text actually say? What is the exact sentence that runs just before you decide, again, to keep it to yourself? Still here, and that was always enough.